This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. J.Lo had me talking about what makes someone a New Yorker last week, and apparently New York said, "Let me show you." Because this week, the Knicks won their first championship in 53 years, and I swear to God, the entire city became one living, breathing nervous system. But something happened that night that I have not been able to shake. And because this is me, I will somehow go from the Knicks to Love Island to Emily Ratajkowski's new essay about sex as a single mom today. So it's a little less structured than usual, but I think maybe that's the point. Last week, I talked about not having to define the chapter that you're in. This week, I'm not defining this episode. So let's just dive straight into it. Hi, it's me, Saskia. Welcome to Note to Self. We're just going to dive straight on in because I am feeling excited today and I have a lot to talk about in a short amount of time because I am meant to be going to a wedding in an hour. First up, we have to discuss one of the greatest nights in New York history. Wow. Guys, it was a week in New York. And let me tell you, I just had one of the most amazing nights celebrating the Knicks winning the NBA championship. I had one of my closest friends visiting from LA with her husband, who I also adore, and they stayed with me in our apartment as Jeffrey was in LA for a bachelor party. We just had this magical New York weekend, just exploring the city, being a tourist in your own city. They used to live here but hadn't been here in a really long time. And on Saturday, we decided to do kind of a restaurant bar crawl throughout downtown Manhattan and go to a lot of their old favorite spots. So we went into the city at like 1 p.m., starting in Chinatown, went over to the west side, went over to the east side, and we knew we would end up somewhere to watch the NBA finals. And we wanted to be outside because over the course of this finals run, people were projecting the game on, buildings and putting up projectors all across the city. And there was a really big one that was happening near my apartment that we'd planned to go to. But we got some insider tea that a friend of a friend was going to be projecting the game in the Lower East Side in this neighborhood called, it's actually not even a neighborhood, this is a lie. It's just an area called Dime Square, which has been around forever. And when I lived in that neighborhood, it was not called that. That is a post-COVID name that somehow was coined due to a restaurant that's in that area called Dimes. It used to be one of my favorite areas when I lived in the city. So we had planned to go to that area and meet a lot of friends there, and we'd watch the game. And the city has just been alive in this finals run. It's been just so beautiful to see just so much connection. And I've heard all these stories of people online experiencing it as well. There was this one that really stuck with me. It was a guy who gets the same bus every day for work. And I guess some conversation had started with the bus driver, and the bus driver was actually speaking to the whole bus. And he was saying that he's never had so many conversations with passengers before. And he feels like it's, credit to the Knicks and just this finals run and how connected the city was. And he said often he feels kind of invisible, but this connection he's been experiencing in his day-to-day job has just been so beautiful. And it just warms my heart, and I hope that it's something that we can continue to foster post this season. But what a beautiful experience just to feel all these people coming together. And I think it's a really, hard thing to quantify because it really is just a feeling. And it's been really over the last few weeks. And I remember feeling it under the K Bridge when we saw Chris Lake a few weeks ago. Because that show is special, but I think it was even more special because of the energy everyone's feeling right now collectively in New York with the Knicks going through the finals. People keep saying it's bringing back pre-COVID days, and I really, really feel that. But anyways, Saturday, the Knicks had won 3 games? Yes, 3, because it's best of 7. I'm so bad at sports, guys. It's hilarious that this is like low-key a sports podcast today. The last game they had played, they were down 29 points. It was the largest comeback in NBA Finals history. Every betting platform and sports expert that were watching the game said that they had no chance of being able to win that game. The odds were like 22-1, but they proved everyone wrong. They were the underdog, and they came back and won that game. So the energy Saturday after that historic win was just like palpable. And we got to Times Square maybe an hour before the game started, and we started scoping out our spot, and we did not have anything. We were just sitting on the curb. I was in my white shorts, and slowly, friends were starting to join us. My cousin and his wife came, and they brought their yoga mats, so we were able to scope out a little bit of an area, and 2 other friends joined us. And then we had a group of 5 people from LA, funnily, but 3 of them, used to live in New York. So we had a nice little solid group of about 10 people. And what ended up happening was originally we thought it was just going to be this random projector that was set up. What happened was this watch party was actually sponsored by a company called Good Baklava, which is a man in New York City who started this baklava company. He goes to different parties and hands out baklava, different events, and he is a big Knicks fan. So he had started posting up outside MSG during this finals run, handing out baklava. So he's been kind of associated with the Knicks run. People in the news have written stories about him and interviewed him. So he paid to have this huge truck with these big digital screens on it come to Times Square and pull up to play the game. And this wine bar that is right in that area, Parcel, were setting up an outdoor bar. So they did a watch party inside at their bar, but then they had an outdoor bar where you could buy wine and cocktails, and everyone was just getting drinks from the liquor store and parking up. We ordered a pizza and all had pizza sitting on the ground watching the game. And it started out as probably 100 people. And we were really close to the TV. We had prime position. But by the end of the game, I read the day after that there was probably 5,000 people that had gathered around this digital truck. I remember looking up and just seeing more and more people arriving. And there was people up on the scaffoldings of the buildings. It was crazy. There was just so many people. And I don't think I have drunk that much alcohol in so long. We just had bottles and bottles of wine, getting ice from the shop to make the wine cold. Oh my gosh, it was just such crazy energy. But I had this kind of big realization during the game. And earlier on, I had asked my cousin, why is it that everyone cheers like you were cheering if you were at a live game? So they're yelling defense, defense. It's the only one I know. Or, whatever the other ones are. But it was funny to me because I get cheering, but I thought it was funny doing the game cheers that you normally do when you're actually at a live game. And look, part of me, I think, was doing it to be a little provocative. But honestly, I genuinely was wondering too. And as I've said, for context, I am not a sports person. This is very new to me. I've never understood sport. I've always liked NBA out of all of them. I would much prefer to watch a basketball game than a football game, much to Jeffrey's dismay, although he watches everything. But football's so boring. Anyways, context though, I'm not a sports person. But sometimes I like to stir the pot when it comes to sport because I get riled up that the arts I don't feel get as much credit, but that is a whole other thing we could talk about, and we're talking about sport today. But I set this context for a reason, because as the game went on and we were in the 4th quarter and the score was getting closer and closer and the clock was ticking down and down, I had this realization. The combined energy of all of us cheering, everyone across the city, 8 million people, I think it was doing something. And I thought about my own belief in energy and how I believe energy flows at a different frequency around us. I think that's what manifestation is. If you can tap into that frequency, then that's how you're able to bring things your way through positive affirmations or positive thoughts. And if 8 million people in this moment are positively thinking and actively thinking for the same outcome, I think that's going to travel and affect this team. And I just started to lose it. I was screaming and yelling. And for the first time ever, I realized why people love sport. I felt myself doing that, like, you know, that crazy scream that you see people do at games where they're like, ah! If you're on video, you'll see it. My eyes like going so wide. I was just fucking mental. Something took over me. And I could see how people feel this is almost like an energetic release and the freedom you get when you're like cheering for your favorite team. And all I could think was, if we just keep yelling and we keep putting that energy out, they're going to win. It's going to come back. You can see them, like, they're just in a groove. And when they did win, the joy of the people around me was honestly something I will never, ever forget. You know, I was surrounded by some of my own favorite people and family that, you know, one of my best friends that I never get to see because she's in LA and normally wouldn't be there, and having this iconic New York moment, which I was really sad to not have Jeffrey. That was the one thing that was really such a bummer. But there was still just so much joy. And they won. And of course, because New York always does this, the iconic New York, New York by Frank Sinatra is immediately blasted across the city. Because this city is just so amazing. It has so many amazing songs written about it. And I remember I jumped onto my cousin, like literally jumped onto him, was like, wow! Then stood on this camping chair that some person had had. I just decided to stand on it and was just screaming the lyrics that I had sung years prior to moving to this city. I always had the song New York, New York in my head. It was just like always there. Something I was always singing. And the line that I think has defined a lot of the reason as to why I moved here, and many people have moved here, and the thing that I keep telling myself even to this day, if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. And singing that, seeing these underdogs win, making it, all the people around us being a part of this like vibrant community. This is why New York is one of the greatest cities in the world, guys. And there's literally nowhere else like it. Nowhere. I cannot express that enough. There are incredible cities in the world, but that experience was just the ethos of New York and why I moved here. It was so special. It was so fucking special. I literally was crying all day the next day because it was just so unbelievably impactful. My friend was, you know, taking videos when they kind of won of the crowd and everyone losing it. And she was panning across the crowd. And then all of a sudden she says, I just see you in the middle of the crowd on this camping chair, arms up in the air, just screaming. She was like, it was the funniest thing. You would have thought you were like the biggest Knicks fan in the world. I did also tell these girls who had come in for the last quarter, I was like, we've been here for like 8 hours, which was such a lie. It just kind of came out. I think the game was 4 hours and we got there maybe an hour before. So I guess we were there 5 hours still. But like, what a psycho. But hey, give your girl a bandwagon and I'll jump on hard. But in the moment of them winning, this was the best part. This is the world I live in. There was like, everyone was like throwing stuff up into the air. You're getting like splashed. There's just like stuff everywhere in the air. You're all wet. And I thought that like champagne bottles are being popped. And it was just like champagne. I was like, oh my God. Like they do in the locker room when they win, how they all wear those goggles and they're all like spraying each other with champagne. So I thought I was covered in champagne. Little did I know until later that evening, I was chatting with one of my friends. I said, how crazy was it when everyone popped the champagne? He was like, what are you talking about? I was like, the champagne, when the game started. And he was like, Saskia, that was just beer. And he goes, man, I would love to live in your world. So clearly this whole experience was really new to me. But like I said, give me a bandwagon and I'll jump on. And honestly, I'm going to keep telling myself it was champagne because the story sounds way better. But really, I think what I can't stop thinking about, as I mentioned at the start of the show, is the joy. And that joy has not left me. I spoke to so many friends after this, and everyone had just had this joyful, joyful, joyful night. And I almost felt like I was having like a come down on Monday because there was just so much joy. I felt wrecked on Monday. And I couldn't stop crying. I just was watching all these videos of, my community and everyone coming together. And it just affected me so much. And just this absolute euphoria with all these people, and then coming home and like coming kind of out of that was just a big kind of transition. And it really brought me back to something that my friend had said to me a few weeks ago, which I've shared on the pod. And she said to me, the greatest form of resistance is connection. And I think people in power know that, because it's been really interesting to see some of the media coverage of the Knicks winning, specifically right-wing media like Fox News, which has really played it off as chaos. And there was so much crime. The city was on fire. The Daily Show did an interesting segment about this that's worth looking at. But on the night they won, because I was actually intrigued on the damage and how much crime there was. And according to the NYPD numbers, they reported 63 arrests, five stabbings and slashings, and 1 Times Square shooting. Not great. And none of that is great. We shouldn't have shootings in this country anyways, but that's a whole other conversation. And I don't condone any of that. But when I initially heard those numbers, at the scale of this city, I was like, that's honestly not as bad as I thought it would have been. I mean, we're 8 million people, and you should have seen how many people were out on the street. Everyone was out on the street. I've never seen anything like it. So with that many people out on the street, I thought the crime probably would have been way worse. So I decided to do more research, because I was like, I wonder what the baseline is for a normal night in NYC. And from what I could find, with the help of my very friendly source, AI, the average daily arrest number in New York is around 156. This came from the new NYPD website. And felony assaults average around 80 a day. So normally 156 arrests, around 80 assaults a day. The night of the Knicks, there were 63 arrests and I guess 6 assaults. So for a citywide championship celebration, that's obviously not nothing, but it's not the war zone that some outlets were claiming it to be. And of course, they only show the footage of like the one burning bus or whatever. And Midtown always gets mental. It's like known for that things get a little hectic there. But everywhere else in the city, we were just celebrating, doing our thing, the beautiful community. You should have, like, walking around that night was crazy. It was just so much energy. I was in the subway. People were just yelling, "Go Knicks, go Knicks." It was so cool. And I can tell you, as someone who was there, and I will reiterate it again, this was not a night of crime. For the vast majority, this was a night of celebration, joy, connection, and community. And people in power fear that, because there is power when this many people come together to connect. I think especially when it's the underdog story, which is what the Knicks represented. And I think New York often represents just a city of underdogs, people who felt like they couldn't fit in anywhere else. So when we win, I think that win that we saw on Saturday night is so impactful for so many people, because it shows that the underdog can win, that you can fight back and come out the other side. And I think it's sometimes the most unlikely heroes that bring us this story. And I have never been more prouder to be a New Yorker. And yes, J.Lo, I wasn't born here, but I am a New Yorker. I'm still riled up about that, clearly. And I think, as I kind of wrap up this Knicks segment, what I thought was funny is everyone is trying to quantify how they won. And obviously that's a sport thing. And as someone who's not a sports person, it just isn't that interesting to me. But they were the underdogs. So people are trying to quantify how they did it. And I did a little bit of research. So the Spurs were considered one of the best teams in basketball all season. San Antonio had 9 more regular season wins than the Knicks. And the Knicks apparently weren't even considered the best team in their own conference, because you have the Eastern and Western Conference, for those that don't know NBA. And then it's the best team from each conference that plays against each other in the finals. But during the finals as well, this was interesting to me. The Knicks were down double digits in every single one of the finals games, and somehow they came back and won 5 of those games. So I'm trying to paint the picture as someone who's not into sport, but the stats were stacked against them. And I think the reason people can't figure out how they won is it's unquantifiable. And I had spoken about this earlier, and the realization that I had watching this game was this idea of energy. And sociologists actually have a name for it. It's called collective effervescence. When thousands of people gather at the same time with the same emotion of joy, hope, belonging, something extraordinary happens in your body. Your heart rhythm synchronizes with strangers, your nervous system wakes up, and you feel alive in a way you forgot was possible. And psychologists note that a lot of us have been living in what they're calling a functional freeze, where they're saying that we're just functioning, we're just managing, surviving, but we're not actually feeling as much anymore. And I think this win opened up this energy portal for a lot of people. And going beyond this collective effervescence, I really, really believe that when we're all wanting that same thing and we're all having this like surge of energy, surely that's going to change this trajectory of where we think things are going. And the team feeds off that. I'm getting so woo-woo, and sports people will not resonate with this. But I think that's why stats can't measure it. And I'm sure there's tons of statistics about, the actual players. They're clearly unbelievably talented. No question. Huge props to them. They worked their asses off. But I think there's an element of what you pick up from all the people cheering from you too. And I'm sure that helped. That's like an incredibly powerful thing. And yes, everyone is cheering for their teams. But there's a difference between this many people out on the streets in such a confined space. That is a different type of feeling, and that's what this collective effervescence is, because you don't get that when you're sitting at home watching the game by yourself. You get that from being on the street. And New York, I think you have that moment a lot because of how compact everything is here. I think the collective effervescence happens all the time at raves, and I think that's why I have a lot of joy when I go to raves and feel so fulfilled by it, because you're connecting with the people around you, and why it's really important the crowd has to be good. But I think that magnitude of the support in such a condensed space, I really think that can change things on the energetic field. And ultimately, the win put New York on the front stage it's not that we're not always on the front stage, but it really put us on the front stage and showed the underdog story and how the city that people love to caricature as too progressive, too chaotic, too much, that we showed up through community, joy, and collective energy, and that we won, and it showed the strength of this community and the uniqueness of it too. And as we have often liked to say the last few weeks, my mayor is Muslim, my bagels are Jewish, Knicks in 5. Had to do it, guys. Had to do it. How much am I on the bandwagon? I love it. Anyways, it's a good time to be here. Next up, we're pivoting hard. We went from a sports podcast, and now we're going back to what I know and love. Love Island, guys. Can't go a week without talking about it. Although I've been really underwhelmed by this Love Island season. So we're not sharing great things about it. And I think the thing that I keep asking myself is, are these COVID era young adults just not good at messy real life romantic relationships? Because a friend made a note to me who's watching this, and she said something that I have been really thinking about now ever since I've watched this show, is that all these young people on this show were COVID teenagers. And I get the feeling that they just don't know how to interact with people. It's like they're missing the whole premise of the show. And I started to wonder with these new generations of COVID teenagers that are now in their early 20s and they're coming into some of these shows like Love Island, if we're going to start seeing this across the board. It just seems to me like they don't really know how to date multiple people or talk to people and still be with someone else. It's just like the whole premise of the show is getting to know people. And the conversations, God, they're so fucking boring. And they've all coupled up so early. They're not exploring. The bombshells are also not bombshelling. I want some spicy bombshell personalities in there. And I just don't feel like they have that. They're all stunning, like sickly beautiful. But I just feel like there's no drama. And they're having to try and create drama, I guess, as producers because of, I think, how dull this season has been. And I think they're all very sweet. And it's nothing to do with them. I just don't think it's a very watchable season so far. And I'm waiting for like the close friendships to form and for them to seem like they're having fun. Because sometimes I don't know if they're having fun. Like the whole Melanie, Sincere, and Soul situation, the triangle. Melanie was freaking out about Sincere getting to know Soul. Honestly, that was good television. But you should be exploring. And eventually, Melanie and Sincere get broken up by the public, and he gets coupled up with Soul. And at that point, Melanie just completely pulls aside, being like, I'm done with the triangle. And I was like, girl, it has been literally, I think, 2 days of you being in a triangle? This is part of it. You don't just step away now because the public split you up. Like, you keep getting to know him, and then also get to know the whoever she was coupled up with as her new couple. And it just felt like this is when there's more interesting conversations, because you see how people navigate those types of situations. So, ultimately now they're back together. So I don't know. Everyone's just back in the same couples. It's very uninteresting. But I do feel like there's just a lack of excitement maybe. And I don't feel like people are being authentic either. I think they're being very conscious of hurting people's feelings, which is very lovely. But I also think in this show, you kind of have to put yourself first. It's literally the premise of it. And, Sincere should have told Soul that he was interested in Melanie still, instead of lying about it. And he just doesn't have a backbone. And I was like, my dude, communicate. It's not that hard. It's more interesting as well. But look, I love this show because I like watching human dynamics and relationships. And it's not like I sit down and watch it every night. I usually have it playing when I'm cooking dinner or something. But I guess this season has started to make me be like, am I growing out of this show? Well, I don't want to say that because I love Love Island. It brings me so much joy. But I don't know, man. I'm just feeling very underwhelmed. And I think other people are too. But I will keep watching it. I will give it a chance until Casa Amor. For those who do not know Love Island, Casa Amor is the greatest week of the season. I always lose it for Casa Amor. They split the couples up, and the guys or the girls, whoever, go to a new villa, and then they both meet whole new bunches of girls and guys, and they spend the week with them, and they have to couple up with someone new, and then they get to come back, and they're either bringing back their new person or they're coupling up with their old person, but they don't know if the old person is going to be with them or not, or decide to couple up with someone else. It is TV magic. It's fucking brilliant. It's so entertaining. I fucking love it. So look, if it doesn't spice up then, I'm going to get driven insane. I'm really hoping it does, because I wonder they'll feel more empowered to explore not having their other couple there. So that's my theory, but we will see. Anyways, let's be real. I'm going to keep watching this, so we'll probably talk about it again. I'll keep you guys updated. You're probably fascinated by this topic. But we're moving on again because it's pop culture. It's a pop culture episode. We're just popping around on the pop culture train. Here we go. Number 3, my last pop culture reference. I wanted to discuss Emily Ratajkowski's new essay for The Cut, Sex as a Single Mom. Mom, I say mom, but it's written as mom is the name of her article, so I can't read it that way. Anyways, I absolutely love Emily's writing. I think she's incredibly smart, and she paints a really great picture as life as a millennial, especially living in New York City and as a woman. I was obsessed with her book, My Body, and I was really excited to read something for her because she hasn't really written anything in quite a while, especially post her divorce. And the article covers her dating life, post-divorce, and motherhood, and navigating being a single mom. But what I found to be a very vulnerable perspective to share is that prior to her divorce, she'd only slept with 8 people, 4 of whom were live-in boyfriends. She said she'd never really had sex with anyone she wasn't sure she would fall in love with. She had this idea that she wanted to be seen as precious, this thought that boys didn't treat girls they thought of as sluts tenderly, and boys didn't fall in love with these types of girls, and they weren't the ones they wanted to raise a baby with. So she very much tried to play the persona of the good girl, the maiden. She thought that keeping her body count low was insurance that no one would ever cheat on her, and she'd be loved, safe, and happy. I thought it was very interesting for her to share that perspective. She's a very outspoken feminist, and I think it's so hard as women because we get taught these value systems of who we think we should be. And I'm not surprised she's adopted this pattern, because I think there's kind of 2 patterns you can adopt. especially at a younger age. And there's one of this maiden, the virgin. Men will love me more if I'm more pure. And then the other path, which is probably more the path I took, where I kind of thought of it as, well, why can guys sleep around and be high-fived, but women can't? And I always used to think of Samantha in Sex and the City, because I think Carrie was more of this virgin maiden. Actually, sorry, Charlotte was, duh. And then Samantha was promiscuous, the quote-unquote slut. Ugh, I hate even saying that because it's like not true, but for the premise of what I'm trying to say here. And I felt like in my 20s, and even, starting at 18, for me, my form of control was to do the exact opposite. Is that if boys can sleep with whoever they want, I can do that too. And I felt like I was owning my body and I was in control of it, and I was fuck the system, I can do whatever I want as a woman. And I think in the same way, Emily was doing that through her own, resistance. But in the same vein as what Emily shares in her article, I think what she realized is that she ultimately wasn't doing it for herself. And that it was just what I learned in my experience, is that I was not doing it for myself. And I was still playing into a cultural trope of what society thinks women should be. In Emily's article, she continues on where post-divorce, she's a single mom. And she felt like this good girl that she was always trying to be. Clearly that didn't work, and none of it turned out to be true. So she became exactly what she feared she would be, which was a single mom and alone. And she decided to, and I quote, this is straight from the article, I decided to fuck my way into a new kind of woman. I wanted to destroy the Madonna, the special girl I'd worked so hard to be before an 8-pound baby had torn my vagina in two and replaced her with the whore. So powerful, man. The takeaway I had was that she was finding her power. And I think sometimes when you lean one way on a spectrum, where she's this, I call it the maiden. I guess the Madonna, I think, is when you move into motherhood, but it is this purity is almost going to the totally other side of the spectrum to find your middle ground. Seemingly, that's what she did. And props to her, because being single and dating around in your 30s, I think, is honestly way more fun than doing it in your 20s. So I think she kind of did it in the right sequencing. And at least you're going to do it on your terms. But ultimately, the takeaway she got in the end was that this seductress, this villainess, the praying mantis, as she called it, was just another character she was playing. So even though maybe in my mind I was thinking, wow, you're like in your 30s, you're so like, look at this life she was living. Ultimately, she was realizing, fuck, I'm just playing another role. And all of it was masking her own desires. What do I really want? And I just think, fuck, I read this, I can just relate to it so hard. Because I think as women, we all play characters, and we all play the roles that society thinks about how we should act as women. And it's really, really hard to find out what is truly, authentically you when you've been sold so many different versions of how a woman should be. And I love that Emily uncovers these things and talks about them. I think she does an incredibly good job at writing about pretty deep themes in a very succinct way. And ultimately, you don't leave the article with her having the answers as to who she is and what her desires are. Seemingly, she's still figuring that out. I think it's just an article that shows a version of herself that she was playing in an era of her life, a chapter of your life, you could say. Just like we spoke about last week. This was just a version of her that has now become part of her. And I get the feeling that this woman who is the same age as me is kind of going through a similar thing that I'm going through, where she's trying to figure out who she is, just like so many of us in our 30s, and untangling what we do for ourselves compared for what we do because we've been fed these ideologies and values from this society we live in. So honestly, I really encourage anyone to read it. It is not a long essay at all, but it's incredibly impactful. And I really feel like most women in their 30s will read this and resonate with it, because I think we all grew up in a very hyper-sexualized depiction of women, whilst still, as Emily said, portraying the good girl virgin, the one that you have to be with. And how fucking confusing is that? No wonder why we either pick one end or the other end of the spectrum. And it's really hard to figure out what you're doing for yourself. I've had to untangle this so much, looking back on my years of being single, in what I did because I wanted to do it, or what I did because I was living this version that I thought was so empowered, when in reality, I was just cripplingly alone and sad. And I just didn't know how to ask for love, because I think I probably didn't think I was lovable. And I find that women, we have this murkiness we have to work through because of how much shit is put on us from pop culture and societal expectations to really get to the core of who we are. And I love women who are asking these same questions. And I think that the way we look at life as women generally is so interesting and so deep, and these conversations are so important. And like I said, we don't have to have the answers, but just asking these questions and talking about it, maybe we can find the answers together. Anyways, as I'm wrapping this up, I think there was something that connected all these stories. I can't help myself, guys. And I think it's the idea of feeling alive. And it's what I felt when I was in New York and the Knicks won. It wasn't just sport. It wasn't just a game. It was thousands and thousands of people remembering what it feels like to want the same thing at the same time and getting it all together. And just to be in a city with strangers and feel, even if it was just for a few hours, that we were all connected by the same feeling. And I also think that's why Love Island feels so strange to me this season, because the whole premise of the show is connection. But so many of them seem really scared to move through that. They're scared to flirt. They're scared to explore, scared to be messy, scared to risk wanting the wrong person. They're not pursuing aliveness. And then there's Emily Ratajkowski's essay, which I cannot stop thinking about, because it's just another version of the same question. How do we know what we actually want when so much of our desire is shaped by what we were told would make us feel safe, lovable, chosen, or powerful? How do we feel alive? How do we know what we want to feel alive? And I think that's why, honestly, the thread between it all is why connection matters, because I think when you feel connected to something bigger, you start to open up different sides of your personality that you didn't know were there. And I think that's kind of the work, is just not defining yourself and holding on to that definition forever, but paying attention to the things that make you feel alive, the people that make you feel connected, and then, what truth comes out of that. And then just chasing that even further and seeing where it leads. Because I feel like that's what's happening to me right now, guys. It's crazy. I keep having these moments of these other sides of my personality. It's like they're peeking through the door, and I'm like, ooh, I didn't know she existed. Like the sports girl. Big Knicks fan now, guys. Knicks in 5. Oh, yeah. Get ready for me to fall off that bandwagon fast. But yes, discovering yourself, I think, is so exciting. And being in your 30s is really fun. And I'm feeling more positive about learning these things and just freedom and not defining it. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Love having you here always, and I will speak to you next week. Bye.